Hi and welcome to this video in the QPSMR Insight Going Deeper series, and this is video 43, and in this video we're going to be looking at importing and managing data, including the data handover technique that's available in QPSMR Insight. So we're going to look at three things in this particular video. We're going to look at importing a project from Spss, importing a project from Spss, and we're going to look at where you want to output your data to a spreadsheet so that you can manipulate it, make changes, and also included in that how to handle open-ended questions. So let's start first of all by the first tech that we can look at, which is importing a Spss project, and that's going to be quite an easy one to start with. So let's just look at that, and let's look at how we import the Spss project. Now that's the easiest one to deal with, so if we click on SSS import, we can just scroll or go through and find the project that we're looking for. And we make a QDF. So this is project from Spss. Kind of my QDF, and I will need to open up the XML file that's been given to me with the Spss data. This one here is called spsdata.xml. So I click on that, and the project magically appears in there with all the variables. Now, if there's any errors in there, sometimes you get exports from other bits of software where it hasn't created the Spss code exactly right. You will get appropriate error messages, and that particular variable or question would be ignored. So let's say there was an error on the Spss script for Q3, or the XML file for Q3. That would just error, and you'll know that the project hadn't been imported properly, so that you could hopefully fix the XML file or ask your supplier to correct it and resend it to you. But once that's in there, you should be able to go straight into producing tables. We should now be able to pick gender as a column, for example, pick the rows as Q12B, and run that, and we should get a perfectly good table out of QPS there. So that was pretty easy, and also I would say that the import from Spss is pretty loyal in the sense that it should match very closely with the original way the questions have been laid out. And when we come to Spss, you'll start to see some of the things that perhaps don't work so well with Spss always, or some of the things that can be issues. The reason for this is that the Spss knows all about single and multi-variables, and that means that when it comes into QPS, you're going to get a very clean import, whereas Spss doesn't really handle multi-response questions very well. It treats them as lots of single questions, and it can then become a slightly more difficult to work with in QPS for that very reason. So let's close this one, and now let's move on to this particular project here. So I'm going to open up this project in SPSS this time. Now, to get from SPSS to QPS, you will need an SPSS license, because what's going to happen here is we're going to use a script that's supplied with your QPS license to convert this project to QPS. So let me just talk you through that. Let's open up this project in SPSS. And SPSS is a little bit slow to open up usually, so we'll just have to be slightly patient while it does that. So it's opening up this project in SPSS. Taking a little longer than I thought. Alright, and here's my project now in SPSS. Now, to convert this to QPS, you'll need to open up a free subroutine that comes with QPS. So if we say File, Open Script, you'll need to find this file called makeqdf.spss. It's usually in a folder in QPSMR Tools, which comes with your installation file. So If we go to your installation, you'll go to the QPSMR CATI installation, which is in program files x86 usually, and then you will open up your license, which is in the netmr folder, find the latest license that you're running, which I think is that one in my case, and we open up makeqdf.spss, and that's just a script that's been written that will convert your project. If we just run that with the play button in SPSS, that will tell me what the name of the QPS is. I can edit this if I want to, so I'm going to call it SPSS Data QPS MR. Click OK, and it will hopefully have made me that QDF. So let's now, that's given me a map of what it's done. Let's not save that. I could have saved that. Let's close SPSS. And you'll see I've now got a QDF made and an ASCII file made. Now, this isn't as good as the SSS conversion, and you'll start to see why. You can see here what it's done. It's sort of made the gender question an integer, and then it's converted it for me in a variable. So underscore gender has picked up the data, but then gender is the question or variable that I'd want to use in my analysis. And you'll also find things like multi-coded questions might get spread across a number of fields here, and you'll need to put them together in a variable. So although it does most of the work for you and pulls through most of the texts, it does it by a sort of conversion process of making an integer and then putting that into an integer. So underscore Q11 is storing that as an integer, and then Q11 here, it's made me the responses that I would expect. So it's a slightly untidy import and sometimes needs a bit of manipulation work, like this multi needs putting back together here as one question probably in QPS. And indeed my analysis break here has come out as a number of variables, and you might find that you've got some redundant variables. So there's a little bit of tidying up to do. Now for MRDCL users, there is a similar routine available, but that has an awful lot of options that allows you to put multi-questions back together. It doesn't go through this intermediate phase here of building an integer question and then putting it into a variable. It will do all the work for you, and it has a lot of options to control how that input works. So that's looking at how that works, and indeed we ought to do a quick table here just to see whether this looks correct. So we click on gender, we click on Q12A here, but we'll pick the variable. I think Q12B's got some data in it actually rather than A. Run that, and indeed there's the table coming from SPSS this time. It's just a little bit untidier than it was for the SSS import. Alright, so that's the first thing that we've looked at then. That's importing from SSS and from SPSS. We're now going to look at outputting all of our data from an existing project and manipulating that data. So I'm going to open up a project here called example project.qdf, and that's already got some data in it. So let's just open that up in QPS Insight, and you can see it is actually just another version of this same questionnaire that we've been importing from SSS and SPSS. So it is the same data actually. And in here you've got some tools if you want to manipulate that data. And again, I can do tables here. It's a project that has been constructed in QPS. One thing you will note is the data locations will be different for each of these versions, because QPS is going to decide where it stores the data when you import it. So whereas when you use QPS, you can decide where the data is stored. When it imports it, it's going to store it pretty much wherever it fancies. So if we want to export a data set, we can open up the data window. We can choose our data file, which is data.asc, and here's my file of 831 records. And I can output that data if I wish to a file. So I could just say export a portable file, and let's call it my data, my temp data. If I could spell it correctly, it would help. now I can pick the questions that I want to output. Now I can pick all the questions, or I can just pick some of the questions. So if I just want to edit a few of the questions, I might just put out a few of these, just perhaps the first 10 I think I picked there roughly. Click OK, and I've now got those 831 records sitting in myTempData.csv. And in here now, if we open that up in Excel, I can edit this in any way I want to. So if I wanted to change some of these values, if I knew, for example, that all the data that was coded a 5 in here should be a 6, for example, I could just do a find and replace in here. Let's change all the 5s. Let's change it to a 4. I'm going to do match entire contents. I don't change any 5, but replace all, and it's made 27 replacements, so that all the ones that were 5 are now 4 at Q7B. And I could then make other changes in here, again to individual records. I could say that that shouldn't be 400, that should be 300, and so on. So anything I want to do, I can change in here, or I can make mass changes to the data. It would probably be a good idea to save this as a new file, so I can now perhaps put an edited on the back of that. Save it and close it, and I've now got an edited version with those changes made. Go back to QPS, and now I could update from the CSV file. So it's going to make a backup of it because it knows I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to pick the edited file. It's a portable file, and it's going to change all the values for each serial number where it finds something different. I don't want a new questionnaire generated here. I just want to click OK, and it's telling me which fields it's editing, and now it's doing that edit on 831 records from that file. I could have just done it on some of the records. I've done it on all the records, and my data is now edited, and I would find the changes in my data file. So if I now went to export it again, it would reflect those changes. So that's a data handover of one sense, where you're outputting all or part of your data to a separate file so that you can edit it, either making global changes or selective changes as you wish to. You can edit data, of course, with inside QPS, but that's much more on a record-by-record basis. So this tool is really much more for making a number of changes. The next technique we can look at is handling open-ended questions, because that's actually a data management task as well. The reason for that is that when you have an open-ended question that you want to code into a spreadsheet to pull back pre-codes within the main QPS QDF, what you're doing there is you're actually doing another sort of data handover, but this time you're doing it on coded data. So let's look at how we handle that technique. Let's open up this very small project I've got here, and we'll actually enter some data here. So what you can see I've got here is I've got 3 questions. Question 1 is just a standard single response question. The second question is an open-ended verbatim question where we're going to type in some answers, so we're going to look at that in a minute. And I've already prepared another question called Q2OE, where I'm going to back code the answers given at Q2 into this question here. And what I've got set up here is a questionnaire, or question rather, which has got 20 dummy responses already set up, so that I can add or edit those a little bit later on. And what we've got in here is that I set this up by setting the value to 20 here when I set up the questionnaire. So I've already done that, but by setting that to 20, I've got 20 pre-prepared responses. And I could have more than that. 20 is just a random number that I've picked, where I've assumed that's enough. Certainly make sure you've got enough responses. If you think you might have 20 or perhaps a few more, make it 30 or 40. Don't under it, but don't go for 9999, which is the maximum, because then you're just wasting space. This checkbox here is quite important as well, because I don't want to actually collect any data for this question when the main data is being keyed in. I'm going to actually code it in the spreadsheet and back code it with my main data. So that's what I've done to set it up. So it's now ready. And now what I'm going to do is do some data entry and then back code it to these 20 responses that I've got. So let's open up the data window. Let's pick a file name, so let's call it open-ended data.ask. And let's add in some answers. So let's say the first questionnaire, they answer yes to this, so we'll type a 1 in here. And the open-ended answer is it helps me to get to work. That's the reason for answering a bicycle. And you'll see that Q2OE is just skipped. And that's the end of my questionnaire. Question 2, yes again. The reason is for cycling the weekend. So that's my second one. On to the third one. Yes again. Why do you own a bicycle? For work and shopping. And the fourth one, I'm going to say yes again. Cycling with friends. All right, so there's my answers, and we're going to save that, and we're going to close. And we're going to close data entry. Now, if I go to the folder, you'll find that the verbatims are stored in this file here. So we can look at them. And sure enough, there's my answers. Just widen these columns here. There's the text that I come up with, and I might want to code this. So to get to work, I might give a 1. At weekend, cycling at weekends, I might give it 2. For cycling, for work and shopping, I might give a 1 and a 3. So that could be a 1 and a 3. And at weekends, and to cycle with friends, I might give a 2 and a 4. So we're basically really setting up a code list here. Obviously, I'd spend more time setting up a code list with a full survey. But we might say that 1 is work, 2 is for weekend leisure, 3 is for shopping, and 4 is for friends or with friends. All right, so let's save that, except now we want to save this as Q2OE. So I'm going to need to change all of the entries in here because I'm going to back code it to Q2OE, which is the question I've stored with my answers. So replace that. That's good. Close. And we're going to save this. And again, I suggest saving it with a different name. I'm going to put coded on the end of this so I know that I've coded this data. And of course, again, this would have a lot more answers in there normally. Now I go back to my project, and in my project I now have some codes that I want to assign. So this is a good time to update the responses, and what I might do now is I change number 1 to work purposes, number 2 I think we said weekend leisure, 3 I think for shopping, and 4 to be with friends. Alright, so that's now given me some answers. Click OK. Save that to my QDF. And now I can update the data. So I can now open the data window again, pick up my questionnaire with open-ended data, and I want to update it from a CSV file. So it's going to take a copy. I want the coded version of this, so I want this file here. I've got selected. There we go. And it should have done that now. So if we go to the first questionnaire, and we can update this. And if we do a table now, we should be able to run that by Q1 and we'll get some figures out. And here we are. Sure enough, there's our work purposes, weekend leisure, shopping, to be with friends, and for 4 people. And they all said yes at question 1, so it's not a very interesting table. But our data handover has worked, and our coding and our pulling that back is worked perfectly well, and we've got a completed piece of work. Well, there we are. That's covering importing from Spss and Spss. It's also covering data management, where you want to output your data to a spreadsheet or CSV file so that you can make multiple changes, either globally or selectively if you wish, for individual records, and then pull that back in as your data set. And it also looks at handling open-ended questions for you. It's also a technique for recoding data to a new format. So if you've got a new questionnaire, perhaps you're running a monthly survey, it does give you a tool where you could output all your data, all the questions in that case, so that they're in a CSV file, build a new QDF, which might be similar or copy or similar to an existing QDF, but for the next month of a survey, pull the data back, and then you could start to make changes and add questions and so on with a new questionnaire that perhaps was being used for the second or subsequent months of a survey. Well, I hope this video was useful. There's many more in this series, but this was video 43, and we hope you found it useful